πρόστιχη προτείνομαι πολύ, αμόχως στο Γκρίνια και Λευκοσία. Και ο Ατήλας μέσα απ' την πράσινη γραμμή τα αδέρφια μας κρατάει σε αιχμαλωσία. Και ο Ατήλας μέσα απ' την πράσινη γραμμή τα αδέρφια μας κρατάει σε αιχμαλωσία. Όμως εγώ δεν ξεχνώ τις προσφυγές και τους νεκρούς μας δεν ξεχνώ. Θα έρθει μια μέρα που η πράσινη γραμμή για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή. Όμως εγώ δεν ξεχνώ τις προσφυγές και τους νεκρούς μας δεν ξεχνώ. Θα έρθει μια μέρα που η πράσινη γραμμή για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή. Εγώ δεν ξεχνώ τις προσφυγές και τους νεκρούς μας δεν ξεχνώ. Θα έρθει μια μέρα που η πράσινη γραμμή για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή. Όμως εγώ δεν ξεχνώ τις προσφυγές και τους νεκρούς μας δεν ξεχνώ. Θα έρθει μια μέρα που η πράσινη γραμμή για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή. Προτείνουμε πολύ και λίγο πολύ σημαντώνει την καρδιά μας. Γιατί προσκύνησα εκείνο το πρωί κι ο Ατήλας πάτησε τα χώματα μας. Γιατί προδόθηκε εκείνο το πρωί κι ο Ατήλας πάτησε τα χώματα μας. Όμως εγώ δεν ξεχνώ τις πρόσφυγες και τους νεκρούς μας δεν ξεχνώ. Θα έρθει μια μέρα που η πράσινη γραμμή για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή. Όμως εγώ δεν ξεχνώ τις πρόσφυγες και τους νεκρούς μας δεν ξεχνώ. Θα έρθει μια μέρα που η πράσινη γραμμή για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή. Για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή. Για τον Ατήλα θα έχει γίνει φυλακή.
But the British government, the EU and the United States government are silent on the fate of our missing relatives and loved ones. Nothing has been done by the EU of a substantial effort to find the whereabouts of our missing relatives. For 40 years.
This is, I mean, my 9th year as a member of Parliament, 9th year here with you, and it's bittersweet. It's, you know, once it's good to see your friends again, but it's very bitter that we're here again. Very, very bitter that we're here again, and we're 40 years on. And what you remind me, and I say it each time, you remind me that it's not just about issues about politicians talking, about negotiations, about UN statements, about talks and talks. It's about human beings. It's about people. It's about family, sons, daughters, fathers, mothers. And that is what you remind me about, that it is that close and that personal. And for that to happen for 40 years, you to be out without justice and truth is unacceptable. Now, there are conflicts going on all over the world, and there are people being uprooted as we speak in Iraq, Syria, and people who are losing loved ones. And the world stands up and takes notice. And campaigns of thought, lobbies take place, and the world tries to come together. And no different should it be as when it happens in those places, it should happen to yourself, to your loved ones. It should be that much of a concern. There should be the same conviction of needing justice and truth. And so we need to just keep reinvigorating people to say, look, this cannot stand. It is unacceptable, and we must have change. But what we do have is the fact that it is 40 years on. must be in this year of years, we must see change and movement. So all of us, whatever opportunity we have, and I have the opportunity in Parliament, the opportunity to speak with other politicians, to speak to ministers, to speak to the Prime Minister and others, to just say to them, look, we ourselves, Britain, must not just walk on by, we must do all we can to seek justice and truth. So we will do, and I will, okay? You make sure that I get reminded of that in these next months I must do, and I will. And try and do all we can to make sure that you don't have to return again next year and say, why, where is it? So look, I'll do what I can. And thank you again for coming. And you are not forgotten, okay? You all listen, we'll carry on fighting, okay? Carry on fighting for justice and truth. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
David Burrows, Member of Parliament for Southgate. My ninth year as Member of Parliament, and it is a tragedy that we're back here again. Back here with the relatives of the missing, who remind us all, politicians, that this isn't just an issue that will go on and on, that can be just debated and negotiated. We're dealing with human people, human beings, families, sons, daughters, mothers, fathers who are lost, who are without truth and justice, and that re-energises myself to say that we must do all we can to fight for justice and truth. In the same way that they are missing, there are people who are being uprooted, whether it's in Iraq, Syria. We as politicians need to take that same notice. The world needs to stand up and ensure that we fight very hard in this year of all years, the 40th year, to make sure we're not back here on the 41st year of Parliament, still seeking justice and truth. We need to do all we can in these months ahead.
Βρισκόμαστε σήμερα έξω από το Κοινοβούλιο και τη Βουλή των Λόρδων, εδώ στο κέντρο της Μεγάλης Βρετανίας, στο Λονδίνο, για να διαδηλώσουμε ακόμα μια φορά και να πούμε στους πολιτικούς εδώ ότι ακόμα το πρόβλημα μας εξακολουθεί να υπάρχει 40 χρόνια μετά. Φαινομενικά, κανείς μπορεί να νομίσει ότι το πρόβλημα προχωρά προς τη λύση του. Διότι βλέπει ότι τα Ηνωμένα Έθνη το χειρίζονται μέσω της Ερευνητικής Επιτροπής. Βλέπει ότι η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση στηρίζει την Ερευνητική Επιτροπή με χρηματικά ποσά κάθε χρόνο για να κάνει τις εκταφές και αναγνωρίσεις. Βλέπει ότι το Συμβουλίο Υπουργών του Συμβουλίου της Ευρώπης ασχολείται με το θέμα μετά από τις αποφάσεις του Ευρωπαϊκού Δικαστηρίου Ανθρωπίνων Δικαιωμάτων. Δυστυχώς όμως, αν δεν γίνει τίποτα, αν αυτή η διαδικασία συνεχιστεί όπως είναι, το πρόβλημα μας δεν θα λυθεί ποτέ. Διότι οι πληροφορίες που χρειάζονται για να βρεθούν τα δικά μας, οι αγνοούμενοι μας, δεν δίδονται από την Τουρκία. Και μόνο η Τουρκία μπορεί να δώσει τέτοιες πληροφορίες. Γι' αυτό πρέπει να εντείνουμε καθημερινά τις προσπάθειές μας να σπίσουμε κέντρα όπως το Λονδίνο, που είναι σε όλα τα μεγάλα κέντρα, σε όλα τα μεγάλες τους οργανισμούς όπως τα Ηνωμένα Έθνη, την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση, το Συμβούλιο της Ευρώπης και όλα, για να πιστούν ότι πρέπει να πιεστεί η Τουρκία επιτέλους να δώσει τις πληροφορίες. Διότι διαφορετικά, αν μείνουμε όπως είμαστε, όπως είπα, δεν θα λυθεί ποτέ το πρόβλημα. Η Ερευνητική Επιτροπή δεν μπορεί να λύσει από μόνη της το πρόβλημα χωρίς να υπάρχουν σοβαρές πληροφορίες. Και μόνο η Τουρκία μπορεί να τις δώσει, αφού ήρθε και έμεινε στα κατεχόμενα, εκεί που όλοι οι αγνοούμενοι μας έχουν χαθεί. Και αν δεν έχουν τις πληροφορίες που είμαστε σίγουροι ότι τις έχουν, μπορούν να τις βρουν. Είναι οι μόνοι που μπορούν να τις βρουν, αφού έμειναν εκεί για 40 ολόκληρα χρόνια. Η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση συνεχίζει να δίνει τα λεφτά, αλλά δεν να πετά. Επιτέλους πρέπει να απαιτήσει από την Τουρκία να δώσει και τις πληροφορίες. Γιατί τα λεφτά χρόνο με το χρόνο πάνε και η Ερευνητική Επιτροπή βρίσκει λείψανα μόνο σε έναν από τους 6 τάφους που ανήκει. Το Συμβούλιο Υπουργών ζητά από την Τουρκία να κάνει κάτι, αλλά δεν τους πιέζει αρκετά. Γι' αυτό εμείς πρέπει να εντείνουμε ακόμα περισσότερο τις προσπάθειές μας, να πείσουμε όλους αυτούς ότι με το να χαϊδεύουν την Τουρκία ούτε δεν θα λύθει το πρόβλημά μας. Και γι' αυτό πρέπει όλοι μας να συνεργαστούμε σε έναν στρατηγικό πλάνο, που με συνεργασία όμως όλων των ενδιαφερομένων πλευρών να πιέσουμε όλους αυτούς που μπορούν να δράσουν προς την Τουρκία για να δώσει το αποτέλεσμα που θέλουμε.
We've come out here yet again, another 40th anniversary. It's an absolute thorough disgrace what's going on. There's no recognition, real efforts to solve this problem. And until we actually solve it in total, not just part of it, we'll go on and on and on. And as long as those people out there that have the information and won't release it, so be it. We'll keep on until we get it.
About the negotiations that have started in Cyprus, do you think it will lead to the resolution of the conflict? Are you optimistic?
I'm not one of the negotiators, and I don't, really insist that they follow a lead which I will take. But I'll tell you this, negotiations is the way forward, but they've got to be meaningful. It isn't just pie in the sky. It isn't just here today, gone tomorrow. These are people and people's lives and families we're talking about, and there has to be a total solution. If there's no total solution, there's no solution at all.
Thank you very much. Βρισκόμαστε εδώ όπως κάθε χρόνο. Σήμερα είμαστε εδώ έξω από τη Βρετανική Βουλή μαζί με την Επιτροπη Συγγενών Αγνοουμενων και είναι μια μοναδική ευκαιρία 40 χρόνια μετά την εισβολή να εκφράσουμε την αγανάκτηση της παροικίας για τη συνεχιζόμενη κατοχή της Βορείου Κύπρου από την Τουρκία. Το γεγονός ότι υπάρχουν πρόσφυγες στην Κύπρο, υπάρχουν αγνοούμενοι, υπάρχουν έπικοι, υπάρχει τουρκικός στρατός και θα έχουμε συνάντηση μέσα στη Βουλή αργότερα όπου θα εκφράσουμε αυτή την αγανάκτηση μπροστά στους βουλευτές, στους Βρετανούς βουλευτές και θα ζητήσουμε από αυτούς τη συμπαράστασή τους. Πιστεύουμε ότι αυτή η χώρα είναι μια σημαντική χώρα για την Κύπρο. Είναι μια χώρα κλειδί, μια χώρα η οποία έχει ηθικές και νομικές υποχρεώσεις προς το νησί και οι βουλευτές αυτής της χώρας είναι σε θέση να ασκήσουν πιέσεις, έχουν επιρροή και πιστεύω ότι θα μας ακούσουν για ακόμα μια φορά. Έχουμε αρκετούς φίλους μέσα στη Βουλή και προσπαθούμε πάντα να συνεργαζόμαστε μαζί τους για προς όφελος της Κύπρου και του λαού της. Αυτά έχω να σας πω.
We are here outside the Houses of Parliament in London because we believe London is in a position to help our case. They are members of the United Nations, members of the European Union, members of the Council of Europe. London is an important center for decision making globally. We need to remind them that although the impression is that everything is going well, because the United Nations, as I said, the European Union and the Council of Europe are dealing with the subject, they're not progressing enough. And if we stay the way, if every one of these organizations, i.e. the United Nations with the Investigatory Committee, the European Union giving the money but not asking for evidence and then don't ask for results, the Council of Europe not demanding Turkey comply with the European Court of Human Rights judgments, the problem would go forever because any information, any evidence that they currently have, gradually is going to diminish and they will never find enough of our people and will still be waiting. Our people will be dying or waiting and waiting without knowing. So that what we need is a strategic plan coordinated with all the people that can join together to impress on all these different organizations to do something more than they do currently. We are here to impress on the government of the UK to do more than they do now.
Your Excellency, Cyprus High Commissioner, my Lord, honourable members of Parliament, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our parliamentary sponsors of the event for enabling us to use these excellent facilities at the House. I'm very pleased to welcome our relatively new Cyprus High Commissioner, my very good friend, no longer, my very good friend Euripides Evriviadis, probably the most energetic Cyprus High Commissioner we've had in this country in recent years. I'm delighted he's here with us. Also delighted to welcome Harry Sophocleidis, my predecessor. I think all of you know who Harry is, so he needs no further introduction. We also have with us Nikos Sergidis and Nikos Theodosiou, President and Executive Secretary of the Committee of the Relatives of the Missing in Cyprus, who've traveled specially from Cyprus to be here with us tonight. I'm delighted that you're here with us. And I'd like to welcome Kostis Evstathiou as well. Where is Kostis? Who is the Vice President of EDEC in Cyprus. EDEC is the Socialist Party of Cyprus. And additionally, we have here with us former Member of Parliament, Tom Cox, a great friend of Cyprus, who is here with us as well. And additionally, we have with us right at the end, Catherine West, who is former leader of Islington Council, and she's the prospective parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party in Hornsey and Wood Green, which happens to be my constituency. I wish you luck. I mean, I'd like to, of course, welcome warmly, we've got 3 members of Parliament here, we'll be joined by others later, and we'll have an opportunity to hear from them in a minute. But I wanted to say a few words. You know, tonight marks 4 decades of military occupation in Cyprus, 40 years of anguish for the relatives of the missing, many of them here with us tonight. The utter injustice of division, ethnic cleansing, cultural genocide, religious desecration. These consequences are the pernicious legacy of Turkey's invasion of Cyprus in 1974. But the tragedy of this island is made even more profound because the will of the United Nations has been defined with complete impunity by successive Turkish governments for 40 years, which makes today an anniversary of failure too, the failure of the international community to hold Turkey to account. Cyprus is up against an authoritarian and intolerant Turkish Prime Minister who has a problem with pluralism in his own country. Mr. Erdogan and his government have shown no real sign of engagement in relation to Cyprus, despite President Anastasiadis' goodwill and readiness to negotiate in a positive spirit. The island's indigenous people, whatever their ethnic origin, and their wishes are the last thing on Mr. Erdogan's mind. This year, our plea to our friends in Parliament carries even greater urgency because the talks currently underway represent a real opportunity for a breakthrough on the island. If only Turkey would seize that opportunity and change its hitherto intransigent stance. The United Kingdom remains a crucial player. It has historic treaty obligations to Cyprus, it maintains military bases on the island, and it is Cyprus's partner in the European Union, in the Commonwealth, and in the United Nations. It is also a strategic ally of Turkey. As such, we believe that the influence of British parliamentarians is of vital importance to the Cypriot diaspora's mission to help deliver long-lasting unity and justice for Cyprus. This will be the last July anniversary event that I will have the privilege to chair in the House as President of the Federation. Constitutionally, I'm only allowed to serve 4 successive terms, and this is my final term. So on behalf of myself and our community, I would like to express our profound thanks and appreciation to all of our friends in Parliament for their long-standing support, and to appeal to their sense of justice and the ideals of liberty and democracy which bring us together in this unequal struggle. And I also want to thank all of you, members, friends and supporters of our community who are here tonight and who have been here on many occasions in the past to show solidarity with our cause. Thank you all. Thank you. We have with us, as I said at the outset, Mr. Sagidis, who is the president of the committee of the organization of the relatives of the missing. And I'd like to ask him to say a few words on behalf of the committee. Mr. Sagidis.
Mr. President of the National Federation of Cyprus of the United Kingdom, Your Excellency, Mr. High Commissioner of the Republic of Cyprus, honorable members of Parliament, dear friends. Thank you for organizing this event for the problem of our the missing person of Cyprus. As you are aware, some 2,000 people from both communities of Cyprus, 1,619 Greek Cypriots and 503 Turkish Cypriots were missing since the communal events of 1963, 64 and the Turkish military invasion of 1974. So many years has gone by and the humanitarian problem of the missing remains unresolved, despite the fact that international humanitarian law provides that the right of the affected families to know must be respected and restored by all involved and especially those responsible. All those in possession of information about the missing or in a position to secure such information have the obligation to provide it. And by saying this, we mean that we demand credible answers for all missing persons, Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. Dear friends, in May 10, 2001, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that in relation to missing person of Cyprus, Turkey violated basic articles of the European Convention of Human Rights. As relatives, we say that since the court's ruling, some steps in the right direction were made. These steps center only on the work of the Committee on Missing Persons, known as CEP, which is under the aegis of the UN Secretary General. For the last 8 years, this committee is operating a program of exhumations, identifications, and return of remains. Until today, a total of 442 families from both communities have received the remains of their loved ones. This consists only the 25% of the total number. If the present rate of exhumations and identification does not change for the better quickly, there will be no parents alive to learn about the fate of their children. We must therefore take action-oriented measures to improve urgently the speed of results, as well as insist on the full implementation of the 2001 judgment of the European Court. To become more specific, we stress the following. First, it has been documented that the archives of the Turkish army contain not only battlefield reports, but also information about the arrest and treatment of hundreds of missing Greek Cypriots. Turkey must be made to allow access to this information, which will enable CMP to expedite and complete its work. Second, the Turkish Army Cyprus is not so forthcoming in allowing the exhumation teams of CMP to work in restricted military zones where there is concrete information that there are mass graves. This need has been noted and underlined by both the UN Secretary General and the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. Third, recent excavations have proved that intentional transfer of remains from the original burials to new unknown locations. The Turkish side must reveal the information about these new locations. Otherwise, This will prevent the families forever from finding out the fate of their beloved ones or from their chance to receive more than just a small piece of bone. Finally, we must emphasize to the fact that Turkey can no longer hide behind the program of the CFP in order to avoid the conduct of an effective investigation, which is clearly included in the 2001 judgment of the European Court. An effective investigation will not only restore the human rights of the relatives, but it will also provide the needed information, thus making the work of the CFP faster and more productive. Time is of essence. Thank you very much.
Well, Kalispera, and can I first of all say how pleased I am to be here. Pleased because there are so many good friends in the room, but also how sorry I am to be here. Because, of course, what we are marking today is the 40th anniversary of a brutal, illegal invasion. The demonstration that has just taken place outside and the speech we've just heard is a reminder of those who disappeared as a consequence or as part of that process. And so it is a matter of some very great sadness that 40 years on, these issues are not resolved. And that despite, as you, Peter, have said in your remarks, in spite of the very clear position taken by the United Nations, taken in principle at least, by the international community, we do not have a resolution, the resolution that the families involved and the people of Cyprus so desire and would so wish to see happen. But I'm pleased to be here as well for a different reason. Because I think one of the things that I take pride in, having been leader of the council in Haringey, not in 1974, but in the years, in 20 years, was the way in which the communities in London, communities in particular in North London, welcomed those who were displaced and came to London into their hearts and into their areas. And I believe that statement about a willingness to receive refugees, about a willingness to work with people from different communities, is something which is incredibly important in the modern world. So, as I said, it's a mixture of feelings tonight. Pleasure to see old friends, but also sadness that these issues are not resolved after 40 years. What I hope is that the international efforts that are taking place now, the desire that I believe exists amongst the people of Cyprus, amongst the diaspora of Cyprus, to see a successful outcome of those processes will mean that perhaps this is, if not the last of these gatherings, that the end is in sight and that progress will be made. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Lord Harris. We also have with us tonight my very good friend Chris Bryant, Member of Parliament for the Rhondda Valley in Wales. I think many of you know Chris. He was Minister for Europe for a while in the previous Labour government, and he's currently a member of the Labour shadow team. Delighted he's here with us. Chris Bryant.
Thanks very much, Kalispera, and I note that I'm Peter's very good friend and you were just his good friend. So I've been promoted. You were his leader, yes, he's frightened of you, maybe not frightened of me, I don't know. Look, there are no Greek Cypriot voters in my constituency. I am not here because there are any voters that I would like to persuade to support me. I am here for one very simple reason, which is that 4 years ago I was Labour's Europe Minister, and there was a moment then when I hoped that in the last year of the Labour government, with Christofias and Talat trying to work together, that it was maybe possible to come to a deal. And when I arrived in post in the Foreign Office, the first thing I said to David Miliband was, look, this is the thing where I think I might be able to make some kind of difference. So I threw as much energy as I possibly could at it, and we all know that we failed. So for me, it's depressing
not only that it's 40 years, but it's 4 years since I was Europe Minister. Not because I'd like the job back, though I would like the job back, but because actually that moment passed, and it feels, if anything, as if there's less hope now than there was 4 years ago, if I'm honest. It felt then that there were two people who could do business together. It doesn't really feel like that to me at the moment. There was a moment when the international community, I think, the European Union, the United Nations, the British government for that matter, were more committed to using every possible leverage they had to try and bring people together. There was a moment when actually when the church and the religious leaders on both sides, I think, were more committed than they are at the moment to bringing about a change. And in the end, it's an absolute disgrace that in the European continent that likes to say that we are at peace and that we've been at peace since the Second World War, we have a capital city of an island that is divided, and you can't simply walk from one side to the other side without going through a demilitarized zone. It's a disgrace. So I'm here really just because I believe in the cause. I want, and God knows when I was minister, I had a row with some of you that are in this room because I didn't agree with you about everything. And there will be many, many more rows to be had before there can be a final answer to this problem. But there must be an answer to this problem. It is not beyond the wit of man, or maybe it is beyond the wit of men. Maybe we need more women to be involved in this, to be able to resolve the problems in Cyprus. So I say thank you very much for having me here tonight. I will remain committed to this cause, and I hope that you will continue the job that you do. But I just want to say one thing about Peter, because one of the reasons that I got committed to this cause was because Peter came and lobbied me. On day like 2, he was in the office. And I think Peter has done a phenomenal job for this organisation. He wasn't a friend of mine before I became Minister for Europe. He made himself a friend of mine. We've become very close friends. I love him and his gorgeous wife, Carolyn. I had tea with Peter the other day, and he was telling me that he's stopping because the rules say, and I said, but President Putin just changed the rules. And I know the Russians have strong connections with Cyprus. No, I'm not advocating that, but I would just say there's one thing. I feel a degree of resentment because many years ago I was the Chief Whip on Hackney Council. And I chucked 18 members of the Labour Party out of the Labour Party for all sorts of different reasons. But one of them is now in the House of Lords as a Liberal Democrat peer. I mention her party affiliation solely because she is now effectively a spokesperson in Parliament on behalf of the Turkish Cypriot community. Now, it's perfectly legitimate that they might have that spokesperson, but to be honest, I believe that the same should be available for the Greek Cypriot community, the Cypriot community in Parliament. So all I say is, I think it's a bit cack-handed at the moment. I think we need to rectify that. And I don't know whether there are any suitable people who might be in Parliament at some point who might speak on that on behalf of that community. But I'd like to say, on behalf of ministers who sometimes I was the 13th Labour Europe Minister. You arrive in post and you don't know anything about anything, really. And actually, when people come through the door and explain and take you through the issues, and don't expect you to agree on every single iota, but take you through it, they actually help you be a better minister. So I just wanted to take this opportunity of saying Evkaristo Polin to Peter Druziotis.
That was far too generous, but thank you very much.
It was
I appreciate it. Thank you. We have Jim Sheridan with us, who is another long-standing friend of the island from Scotland. So we have the United Kingdom well represented here tonight, because we have Wales and we have Scotland as well. So Jim Sheridan, please, if you would say a few words, Jim.
40 years is a long time. I mean, that's probably equivalent to the last time Scotland qualified for the World Cup. So, I mean, it is really nice to be here. In terms of Cyprus, I've been heavily involved, as most of you will know, with the Committee of Missing Persons and trying to get some sort of closure for the relatives and indeed the friends of those who lost their lives. And it's proving to be extremely difficult. We had again at the Council of Europe, we had the United Nations come along, and it was somewhat depressing to hear that their exhumations have decreased. That means that they're now bringing less people to the fore, the remains of people less to the fore than we would have hoped for. And that's probably down to a number of reasons, none more so than resources, financial resources. But for me, the big reason why that number has decreased is the lack of cooperation from the Turkish authorities. I think it's quite disgraceful that they are hiding information or withholding information that people can get in order to get some sort of closure to this whole sad episode. And I've said that quite clearly to the people from the United Nations, and I've said that openly to the Turkish authorities as well. There's more that can be done, and hopefully more will be done. But we need to make sure that we get the right information, and that's why I think we need to continue with the investigation, we need to continue with the inquiry, we need to continue putting pressure not just on the UK government, but on other governments to make sure that financial resources are there to try and get some sort of closure. Along with Harry Sophocles and Alan Meal, we visited the laboratory in Cyprus just over last year. And I have to say, the people who work there are certainly very committed, very professional, but they're working with limited resources, but more importantly, they're working with limited information. And that's the problem that we have. So I am committed to the problem of Cyprus. I am committed to making sure that the relatives of the missing persons get all the information they need, they get some sort of closure in this, and it won't take another 40 years, and I don't like to think it will happen sooner rather than later, but we need that commitment, that cooperation from the Turkish authorities, but we also need the international pressure on the Turkish authorities to make sure that that information is available. And I thank you very much for coming along today.
We have another, thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate your words. We have another Cypriot here with us, who is the Vice President of EDEC in Cyprus, Kostis Evstathiou. Kostis, would you like to say a few words, please?
I'm a lawyer in Cyprus, so I can approach the issue on a different basis. I think that the problem of the missing persons is not only a humanitarian issue, it's a crime against humanity. My family has experienced too the intolerable part of uncertainty and drama of the missing persons. Mr. Theodosi knows that the case. My uncle was a young teacher of music, 27 years of age. He was taken along with 11 inhabitants of the Alusa village some days after the ceasefire, and he was disappeared. His remains were discovered some 35 years after, in a mass grave. He was abducted by the Turkish troops. He was executed by the Turkish troops. His remains were proved to be full of holes from the skull and the limbs, from the bullets. What that means? That means that the Turkish army was the one who planned and executed their assassination. It was not an atrocity, a spontaneous atrocity where somebody can claim. It was a well-planned assassination in order to kill the will of the Cyprus people to resist. That, according to the law, amounts to a war crime. If during the Second World War all these mass killers were taken before the courts, that should have been made in the case of Cyprus. Now we know that the International Criminal Court tries people again for this kind of crimes. The question is why Turkey has been exempted, has been given this pardon without being
Thank you very much, Kostis, for those words, which really demonstrate vividly, the humanitarian nature of this problem. We have Sir Alan Neil here with us, who is a long-standing friend of the island. He's been with us for many, many years. I'm delighted that he's here once again. I'd like him to say a few words.
Can I first of all say it's an absolute honour and a privilege to be here tonight, not just with a room full of friends, but actually to have the Missing Persons Committee over here from Cyprus, who I've tried to work with for decades now, and right away from the very, very beginning, and they've given me every ounce of support I've ever needed to do that task, and I'm really honoured that they've managed on the 40th anniversary to get over to Britain to actually, again, keep the cause going. I want to also pay tribute to somebody in the room tonight who I feel very deeply for, an ex-colleague of mine, Tom Cox, who was a real hero. In life, in politics, it's sometimes very easy to be a hero, but other times it's bloody hard. And he was on his own many, many weeks and months and years when nobody else would come in support. And I can tell you this, it's sometimes lonely out there, and Tom felt a bit of that, and mainly for Cyprus, I have to say. Now, here we go again, 40 years since all of this started. And it started because of the actions of a Labour government, who got in and did what it said it was going to do. It freed Cyprus to be an independent country. And with that, it became a guarantor of power. And what happened shortly, a few years after that, was that people took advantage of that for their own behest. Whether it was territorial, whether it was for land or property or a part of the Middle East is yet open for debate. Whether it was actually all those years ago, even then, about oil, about shipping or whatever. But it happened, and it was illegal. It was illegal. An invasion took place on a sovereign country within Europe, and people went in there and occupied a third of the island. And if they hadn't been stopped by the UN, they would have actually taken over probably 100% of the island. And there would have been many, many deaths indeed. Now, in the years of Henry Kissinger, he actually said at the time it was only a short incursion, it would be sorted out, and he said to the government in Britain at that time, leave it alone, it'll all go away, the UN will be involved, and so will we, and you, everything will be panned out in a very short period of time. It was an absolute lie, and it was said deliberately, because it was in American interest for Turkey to be in Cyprus, which the United States of America wanted a foothold in the Middle East, yet another one. It saw Cyprus as the ideal opportunity to do that with another NATO member. That's the reality, and that's what actually occurred. And by the way, since then, other than Joe Biden's visit just a short time ago, there hasn't been much done at all in relation to supporting Cyprus in the whole of this endeavour. It's actually remained in America's interests. And why is that? Why is that the case? And let me just go through it. When we, in the Labour Party, the Labour government, insisted that Cyprus actually should be made a member of the European community. What happened was that a few voices said no, but the rest of them said yes. And why did they say yes? Not because it was a way to solve the Cyprus problem. They said yes because it was in their interest to do just that. Cyprus is one of the telecommunications centres on Earth. It's one of the windows into space, and telecommunications is the future. Europe, by and large, has a lousy relationship with the Middle East, the Eastern Europe and Africa, and Cyprus doesn't. It had its own offshore banking system. It probably had oil and gas, which they knew about then. It had the second largest shipping fleet in the world. So there we were. We started to move towards what was the solution by saying, we'll get Cyprus in, we'll sort it all out. Well, let me just remind you, here we are today in Europe, with a sovereign country in there occupied. It's absolutely horrendous, and we shouldn't allow it to continue. And I say this, if human rights is important in Germany, if human rights is important in France, if human rights is important in the Middle East, if human rights is important in South Africa through Nelson Mandela, if that is all true, Russia and so on, why isn't it the same case in Cyprus? The reality is that Cyprus has been put right to the back of the agenda. It's served a purpose on international trade and whatever. It's too big an issue to take on because there's 84 million on the edge, people on the edge of Europe, and they're more important. It's a trading base, and I think it's also a NATO member. And I think we now have to have a different approach to it altogether. Now, I always try my politics to say, how would I feel if it happened to me? In my constituency, 64% of my constituents are below 40 years of age, below the time period you have actually put up with the invasion and the occupation of your island. 40% of your situation is nobody to answer. Let me go on a little bit in relation to that. If I had my house taken away from me, my land taken away from me, my family separated, made to live in different countries in the world, to have some of my family missing. And I speak to you, from a point where I have that. My grandfather, my mother's father, died 3 months after he went to war in the First World War. His body has never been recovered. He's one of the 75,000 soldiers who were sent out from the British Army, which is still missing. His name is on the Tiefel Monument in France, in Belgium. The reality is I know what it's like to be missing. I know my mother, when I eventually sorted out for her to go and visit the monument in Belgium, when that happened, where she broke down, somebody she'd never actually met, who she was conceived by and was born 6 months after he went to war. Now, what it must be like to people like your relatives and the missing, some of whom are very elderly now, back in Cyprus, to have their child, to have their brother, to have their sister, mother or father, still technically missing. You know, what it must be doesn't bear thinking about. I met a girl outside, a woman outside, who was pleading with me to take up again the case of her brother who, when he was taken in the whole of this dispute, was only 4.5 years old. Now, what kind of a war is it? What kind of a people are we that will allow people to be taken under other people's command by then? And despite the efforts of then the American ambassador, the British ambassador, the acting Cyprus of the Republic, and of the illegal regime, they were unable to get that child back. Yet everybody knew he was missing, everybody knew he was in hospital, and was actually being treated. Now that's what you have to go through. It's unthinkable. If it happened to me, I'd be furious, and I wouldn't ever get rid of that anger or determination to change it round. But I say in this room tonight, we have to think about what it's like as Europeans. You, a member of the European family, all of you. Cyprus is there, it's all part of the... And what use was it to bring Cyprus into the European community if we weren't going to actually deliver on the rest of it? And the rest of it is human rights. We have a court of human rights, where in Britain anything goes wrong, we go whole of the way through the judicial system, and then if there's nothing left, you can go to Europe and plead even more. Cyprus, you get none of that. You get none of that at all. Despite the case of the Louzides case and one or two others, the situation has not changed. The vast majority of people are still undermined by a legal regime and occupation of a third of their island. Now that is totally unsatisfactory, unacceptable. Where 40,000 troops occupy a part of Europe where they have no right to be in. We have to change that. Because if we don't, there is no use, no reason why we should have a Europe. The reality is, if it doesn't sort things like that out, it's not worth having at all. They sorted it out in Germany. They sorted it out, if you like, in the Eastern Bloc. They've helped in the process of lifting the whole of that fence up and allowed people to come into Europe, but also to help the Russians build their own democracy. But they're not doing it in Cyprus. And I say at the beginning of this, here we go again. We're in another set of talks in New York and Switzerland and all the rest of it. And I just wish them every success. But I say to you that the real issue is Europe's. We have to be saying to Turkey, you have to stop, you have to move, you have to go. And the first part of that has to be the removal of the troops from that part of the island. Because without that, There is no solution at all, because on that island, it isn't the government of Turkey who runs it, it's the military regime that's there. So I say this to you, that we've got a long way to go, a lot of hard struggles to put forward. But I believe, in all sincerity, that we will win. One day, everybody in this room will wake up and it'll all be over. It'll all be solved, it'll all be back into one island, one community and all the rest of it. And you will wonder, right at that moment, why on earth it took so long to occur. But it will happen. It will happen because the world generally is a nice place to be, and most people come eventually to the right decisions, and it will occur. But in the interim period of time, it's very, very, and can be very painful. So, but all we must do is struggle on, because one day we will win, and that I'm sure, and we'll go forward and reunite the island. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much to Sir Alan Neil, a long-standing supporter of the island. We've been joined by Mike Freer, Member of Parliament, who is sitting at the back. He's unable to speak, but he's here with us, and I thank him for that. And we have also been joined by Andy Love, Member of Parliament for Edmonton. I think I'd like to give you the opportunity to either ask questions of the parliamentarians here or make short contributions, please, from the floor. Sir Alan Neil wants to say a few words in response to what Kyriakos has just said.
Just to say, Jupras, I mean, I know your feeling on this, and it's very profound. But, there's as Sir Giddy said, there's only 25% of the missing being found, which means 75% haven't been found and recovered. And Jim Sheridan and I recently went to the labs, as he talked about. We went in there, and out of the ones that they found, every single one of them was shot in the back of the head. They're all assassinated. And what we had here is not just missing people whose remains have been recovered. Well, we can just look at them like that, and solving the problem is finding all the remains. That isn't what it's about. It's what Sigidi said. We have a responsibility to ensure to find out what happened, and to, if you like, point a finger at people and say that they were responsible. It's no good, or sitting back and to say, it'll go away. It cannot go away. It's an infringement of civil rights in Europe, and has to be put around, because if it doesn't, let me tell you, if it doesn't, it'll happen again. And then we'll say, why didn't we do that? The reality is we have to solve this mystery in its entirety. Wherever there's one single person out there remains are missing, we have to search. And until we do, it's not good enough.
Countries that really have influence in resolving, if they really want to, this injustice that we've heard repeatedly here tonight still exists 40 years later, following that invasion in the Republic of Cyprus. And those two countries, in my view, Peter, is Turkey and the United States of America. Now, we may have, the United Kingdom, some influences with Turkey, but nothing compared to what the United States have. Now, I understand that very recently, the Vice President of the US, Joe Biden, made an official visit to Cyprus, which was welcome. And during the course of that visit, he, as I understood, very clearly said the policy of the United States administration, there is only one Cyprus. The Republic of Cyprus is the only government we will recognise here. Now, I hear absolutely nothing about Biden's visit. There was no coverage in this country. One hears nothing at all, Peter, about the present stance of the coalition. I mean, where is this issue in this Parliament? I was here for 35 years, and I can remember people like Finsberg, Geoffrey Finsberg, who was a member of the Council of Europe and presented an enormous report on Cyprus. Nothing ever followed from it. There was a Spanish deputy called Cuckoo, who again presented a report overwhelmingly in favour of the Greek Cypriots. And I've been with Eddie O'Hara into the occupied area. It was a sad, sad experience to see it. Because to me, Peter and Eddie, who sadly can't be here this evening, the occupied area is no longer Greek Cyprus, it's Turkish Cyprus. And they have deliberately done this. So as we come up in 10 months' time to an election here, not only from the present coalition, but from all of the main parties, where do they stand on the injustice the people and the country of Cyprus still experience 40 years after that brutal invasion? Where do these political parties in this country stand? We've heard repeatedly, I can remember, and there may be colleagues here who can remember, having a debate when Joyce Quinn was a Foreign Office Minister, and I touched on Famagusta, and she said, oh, Famagusta, what a tragedy. But it can only be settled in a comprehensive solution. I attended meetings here when Rauf Denktaş was the leader of the Turkish Cypriots, and Denktaş only had one agenda: recognise my independent state and I'll sit down and talk to you. Well, if that had happened, what would there have been to talk about? So what is now going to happen with those countries in the United Kingdom? Cyprus is a fellow member of the Commonwealth, the European Union. We are one of the guarantor powers for the island of Cyprus. I don't ever see us doing very much to end this injustice.
Gareth Thomas, of course, is Shadow Minister for Europe, so somebody who, if elected, if we have a Labour government next year, will be presumably Minister for Europe and therefore influential in government in relation to Cyprus. Gareth Thomas.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to come here and speak this evening, but having to follow Tom makes me slightly more nervous than I was. When I was first elected in 1997, Tom was, thank you very much, was very much in his prime and was always a great advocate and known as a great advocate of your cause this evening. So I hesitate to follow him for that reason, and the fact that he hasn't lost any of his oratorical power, as we've just heard. As your chair has said, I was appointed as Shadow Europe Minister. I was appointed back in October, and you'll forgive me if, such as the debate here in the UK, that the priority up to now has been the issue of whether Britain should stay in membership of the European Union or not. Every Friday I go to this particular place for lunch in my constituency in between surgery sessions. And when they heard that I'd become Shadow Minister for Europe, they said, well, actually, you need to know we're Greek Cypriots. And every Friday since then, I've had a lesson in the history of the last 40 years. And I say that as in a slightly flippant way, but there is a broader point to make, and that is, I think this, that the injustices which you've clearly been talking about this evening, and which loom large in the minds of the whole of your community, have got to be addressed if we're going to see an end to the division in Cyprus. You can't forget those issues and think that you can achieve a solution and an end to the debates that we're having here in the future. They have to be solved. Each issue that's part of the injustice, which is the current situation on the island of Cyprus, has got to be dealt with. Whether it's missing people, whether it's Famagusta, whether it's any other one of the issues that remain, they all have to be dealt with, and they all have to be addressed. And there are different ways in which you can create the conditions for a comprehensive deal. but you can build confidence. And one of the continued suggestions from the European Parliament has been, for example, the movement on Famagusta would be one powerful way to build confidence for the prospects for a comprehensive deal. Now, I hope to go to Cyprus in the next 6 months. I haven't had the chance to go up to now, but what I promise to do is that I promise to consult with your organisation before I go, and to talk with you afterwards when I come back about the things that I've seen and some of the questions which I think still need to be resolved. I met with the Archbishop when he came over on his recent visit, and I hope to see him again when I go over to Cyprus. We've got to see a resolution to this issue, and it will be one of the priorities in my brief that we continue to make progress on this issue. And wouldn't it be fantastic if, as part of the next Labour government, we were able to see a deal done and justice on each of the different questions that we've been discussing now. As Sir Alan alluded to, we have to hold to that possibility. Despite how long it's been, the occupation has been going on, we have to hold to the belief that if there are people of goodwill, then we can do a deal and we can make progress on all the issues, and we can get resolution and justice done after 40 years of conflict. So it is an issue that I am beginning to get to terms with now. Alan and Andy and others within the Parliamentary Labour Party have made a point of briefing me, in Alan's case, in bullying me to come along tonight and to meet the Archbishop and various other meetings. And you can be assured that they will continue to fight the cause of justice in terms of Cyprus within the Parliamentary Labour Party. And I have no doubt they'll continue to work with me and to work on your behalf here in Parliament. But I hope you'll continue to offer me the chance to learn from your experience. And I certainly hope, Chair, to speak with you before I go, and as I say, when I come back. And as I believe when there is a Labour government, then you will need to continue to keep up your pressure on us to make sure that we stay committed to the cause of Cyprus going forward. And that as part of that, we stay committed to keeping the European Union focused on the cause of justice in Europe. Forgive me that I was late and forgive me that I have to go now, but I hope that you'll continue to support Alan and Andy as they put pressure on me and keep the cause of Cyprus very much alive within the debates that Labour has about our international work going forward. Thank you.
I'd like to give the opportunity to perhaps some women or younger members of the community to ask a question or say a few words. We haven't had any younger members of the community. We have one here.
My question is, in my opinion, the main problem here is the fact that Turkey has done so many atrocities before and hasn't been condemned for them. Yeah. For example, we've had the Kurdish and Levy massacres in Dersim, the Armenian genocide in 1915, and what of course the Cyprus issue. And in fact, when France recognised genocide, Turkey responded by cutting lots of £1 million worth of military deals, putting this much pressure. How can Turkey have that much pressure on the West when it should be reciprocal, not just unilateral in that direction? And so my question is, if we have this issue, difficult issue here, when you've got very limited, very, very limited condemnation of previous actions, how can we get a solution to this? We can't just say throw petty things, or we're going to apply a little bit of pressure here and try and come out with an answer. And in my opinion, I'm a student at SARS University, and I'm quite involved in the Armenian issue, and I have a lot of Turkish friends, and we have discovered the way of going forward is actually through both communities. Okay, the Armenian side have got their protests and their lectures to educate each other. But along the Turkish community, we've also got lectures. You've got Taner Akçam, Müge Fatma Göçer, who are academics and are supporting the causes. And we need to work with both communities to actually find a solution. which leads me, sorry, this has been taking quite a while, but my question is then, how can we use both communities? We've been talking about the Greek Cypriot community and how we can get involved. How can we use the Armenian, the Maronite, Kurdish, Arab and Turkish communities in Cyprus to come to a solution? Thank you very much.
Most of us have been coming, as you said, year after year to these wonderful meetings and have had support from extraordinary ministers. But in reality, the only thing that's changed in the years is we hear 1 year, this is the 30th anniversary, then it's the 31st, and we've now reached the 40th. That's the only actual change that we hear as the public. Obviously, words like it's sad that Turkey's still there, it's unacceptable the army's still there, they've had a get out of jail free card, as this wonderful gentleman over here has alluded to. And yet, recently, when there was a Russia and Ukraine situation, the speed with which America insisted that they and the world applied sanctions made my head spin, it was so fast. And yet, 40 years later, nobody has said boo to Turkey.
Exactly my point.
What has actually happened on this 40th anniversary?
Well, we have Andy Love here who wants to respond to some of those questions. Andy.
There's a shadow hangs over this year's anniversary. A shadow that wasn't there before, because 40 years is a very, very long time. And the shadow relates to all of that international outrage that there was in 1974 when a sovereign, independent nation was invaded. Whatever happened to that international outrage? The high-level agreements, everyone thought they would be the basis of a quick settlement. Whatever happened to the high-level agreements? All the United Nations initiatives and talks under various Secretary-Generals leading up to, of course, Kofi Annan, and we know what happened to the Annan plans and the failures that there was there. And of course, we've tumbled along. And it would be the easiest thing in the world to say, there is no hope, there is no possibility. But I'm here tonight to say that I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I know that you don't believe that because you're here. You're here, you're taking part. I don't believe that of the people I met, we all met earlier on this evening, whose relatives have been missing. One woman in particular struck me who had a 5-year-old brother. He would be 45 now, missing all that time with no realisation of what had happened. Everybody wanting closure for their family, yet 40 years on, we're still in a situation where the vast majority of those affected by these issues are still waiting. The international. Now we can all take a fair share of responsibility, and as a representative who has many, many Cypriots as friends and constituents, I'll be only too pleased, glad to recognise the failures of the international community. And we could all put our hands on our hearts and say we may have missed an opportunity, we may not have tried hard enough, we may not have been as committed as we should have been. But that doesn't really help us. What we need to do is to look to see objectively what the situation is today. And I'm not going to say to you that there are signs there that there's a settlement round the corner, because you know, you've been involved in this too long. You know the signs when there is real progress and when there are false dawns. But I think that we exist on hope, and hope will see us through to a final solution to the Cyprus problem. And I'd like to talk just briefly, and I think hopefully I'll pick up some of the issues that have gone round the room. First thing, sign of hope. if I can put it that way, is the confidence building measures. I do believe, and there may be people in this room who disagree, I do believe that progress, modest progress, but progress has been made by the Committee for Missing Peoples. And they've been stung. When I was out there, we met with them and we talked a great deal about the work that was ongoing, and they were telling us about their financial difficulties. We tried to help them to solve that. We weren't successful, but I know from reading Cyprus newspapers that there has been an injection of funds that will allow them to be much quicker in addressing the conscious desires of the relatives of missing people. And I think for the faster they do that work, the greater the confidence that will be built between the two communities. So I celebrate the work that the committee is doing, but we need to go further. And we look round, and the Famagusta initiative, it's been here, we've been here before, but the one thing that differs, or two things that differ about the Famagusta initiative are, first of all, the President has put his own reputation behind the Famagusta initiative. And he's done that, I suspect, on the basis that the Turkish Cypriot community in Famagusta is supporting a very similar initiative. So it's a cross-community initiative. Now, would I put my hand up and say we're going to see real progress on the Famagusta initiative? It is there. It is a confidence-building measure. It is drawing the two communities closer together, and for that we have to celebrate it. But the third area of confidence-building measure is perhaps the one that may provide the greatest benefit. I noticed from reading the newspapers that Apostolos and Andrea is finally going to start. And we all know the times that have been taken to get to where we are. And it's shown the determination of everybody involved and the willingness, whether with the arms twisted, but the willingness of the authorities in that particular part of the island, who we know because of the difficulties experienced by the enclave have not been cooperative in the past. That's a sign of confidence building measures. But I go further than that, and I take up the point that Tom Cox mentioned. The Vice President of the United States came to Cyprus and he reaffirmed United States policy, and that you would expect. But the fact is, he came, the last person from the United States of such importance to come was Lyndon Johnson in 1963. That seems to me to show that there's a renewed interest in the United States. Now, cynics would say, and I'd probably be one of them, that they're being rebuffed in every other international issue under the sun, and that's true. Mr. Kerry's had a pretty horrendous time in the Middle East, and we all know the developments there that are not in either the Americans' interests or our interests. So it could be that they're turning to Cyprus because they think that something can be done. But the fact is that they are doing it. And I know this week Joe Biden visited the Patriarch in North America. I don't think that's coincidental. I don't think that that's not sending a signal. I don't think that's not the United States taking a greater interest than they've ever done before. And we ought to celebrate that. The international community, I'd love to be able to say that we were doing more, or we're doing what we should be doing. I don't think we're putting pressure sufficiently on Turkey. I don't think we've raised it up the international agenda as it needs to be, as Ukraine has been, as some of the other flashpoints of the world have been. I would say to you, one of the reasons for that is, of course, that the division has, to all intents and purposes, over the last 40 years, been a peaceful division. And I'm not suggesting that to find a solution we need to start firing guns at each other, God forbid, but the reality is that we need to recognise that the international community hasn't played as much of a role. But I'm modestly interested that the negotiating process has gone faster and more regularly than it has in the past. I wouldn't want to read too much into that, because I don't think we can read too much into that. And yes, there'll be those that will say that Dr. Aroglu is playing a fast and loose game with the negotiating process. And yes, the Turkish government has got many other issues that it's having to deal with, as though it's turned its attention from Cyprus at the current time. It seems to me that there is a role here for the international community to bang heads together amongst the two communities. I know that the President Anastasiades is pressing very hard for more regular meetings at presidential level for the negotiating process, and that seems to be an entirely good thing. So I'm hopeful, modestly hopeful, that that might lead to progress. Not to a solution, but to progress. But if we're to find a solution, and I'll end on this point, if we're to find a solution, I think the very first time I ever addressed a Cypriot audience, I said the solution lies in Ankara. And to some extent, that's still the same, still the case. And yes, the Prime Minister is attempting to become an executive president, and yes, he's got Geki Park on his back, and yes, he's got his attempt to stop Twitter and social media operating. Yes, his reputation internationally is probably at a low point, but he seems secure in Turkey. And therefore we have to recognise that the AK party is the one that you have to deal with. But I was meant to be at a seminar earlier on this afternoon where they were saying, is Turkey looking towards Europe, and is Europe looking towards Turkey? Well, the recent European election results are probably going to make it on balance more difficult for Turkey to gain membership, and addressing the point that the gentleman made about European attitudes. It will harden, certainly in the Parliament it will harden, certainly amongst some of the member states it will harden. But the reality is, and I say this, and it will probably be controversial in this audience, Cyprus needs Turkey to join the European Union, because that will lead to the reunification of the island. And that's what we have to ensure, that Turkey is totally aware of, the need for them to recognise that a solution in Cyprus is a precursor to membership of the European Union. That message, I know, because we've spoken to British ministers and indeed opposition figures as well who go and visit all of these countries, that message has been communicated. Is it being communicated loud enough? I don't think so. I don't think so. I would accept that criticism as it has always been. But summing it all up, it does seem to me there is movement in the negotiating process. Confidence-building measures are making modest progress. The negotiating teams seem ambitious, and that's to be a good thing. There is cross-community initiatives that will help to consolidate the idea that the two communities can and should and will live together. And all of that seems to me to give us the modest hope that where we look to this as the 40th anniversary, I first got involved more than half of that time ago. I would not have believed that we would reach a 40th anniversary. But we have reached it. But we have that modest hope, and we cling to the hope, because on that basis you can look forward to the possibility of progress, perhaps even a solution in the medium term.
But we have David Barrows with us, and I would like David Barrows, who is very well known to all of us, to say a few words for us. Thank you very much, David.
It's good in one sense to be here. As I said to the relatives of the missing outside, it obviously is always bittersweet, isn't it? Seeing people again, but very ever so bitter years go by and there isn't the change that we all so very much want. I also recognise I've come at the end of a lot of other speeches, and so I've tried to avoid too much repetition, but I'm sure I agree with everything my colleague said when I wasn't here. But I just want to say something just about just the humanity of it all, because I think we can, all of us, and I spoke a year or so back about the whole issue of almost you get into sort of Cyprus fatigue, almost people who get used to the problem rather than the solution. And the danger that poses to all of us as politicians, almost you get into a mode where we're used to going through the processes of campaigning and talking without really seeing action. And so I welcome the fact that the relatives come here, as well as others as well, because with the photographs hung on the necks, do make it very clear just this is very much an issue of humanity. It's not an issue of politics, actually. It is an issue of humanity and injustice that's gone on year on, to the point where people don't know the truth and justice about loved ones. And that's something which is unacceptable. It's unacceptable wherever it takes place, for any corner of this world, and indeed totally unacceptable in relation to Cyprus, of all places in Europe, and to have this travesty of injustice going on year out. Now, on Sunday I had over for lunch friends who live for the most part in the Kurdish part of Iraq, and they were telling me how just an hour from them there were friends that they know that had suddenly been uprooted, and they had to just go off with what they were wearing, maybe grab a bag, but leave friends, family, possessions, and go. And as he was saying this, I was just reminded, 40 years ago, that's what I knew, obviously so well, and yourselves have those experiences of that very thing, that very aspect happened. Now it makes headlines. Now the world looks on and is extremely concerned about the terrorist activities, the intrusion on people's rights, human rights just being introduced. And we stand up and take notice. The headlines come out, and I'm reminded when we go to maybe a lot of Cyprus dinner, they have the old headlines, the Sun, and the headlines that were out there after what happened 40 years ago. And we need to be reminded of that the same sense of injustice, the same outrage, the same call for action that happened those 40 years ago should just be the same. That injustice hasn't changed to this day today. And so we need that constant reminder, which is why it's so good that you are here. You still do come, you still do campaign and rally, and that must increase. And for the younger generations, that needs to increase as well. We need to pass on that needs to continue. But look, we don't want to just go into the mode where we are planning for next year to be here. We don't want to be here into the same shadow. And so, what you're doing is continue to urge us, and we are friends of Cyprus here from across parties that are united to do what we can do. And so we can't be settled down. We can't be settled that we're doing enough. We must ensure that we're shouting from the diplomatic rooftops that this is as much an injustice what's happened in Cyprus as it is in Iraq, as it is in Syria. Obviously there's different elements of humanitarian crises, but still the injustice is the same. It's an absolute issue which has been introduced, and we must seek that to happen. So, this is a year on years. I think we must take the opportunity that we have in this 40th of years to do all we can to make sure we don't get to the 41st. And I'm somewhat hopeful and optimistic, but recognising I've been going through 9 years of all this, I have that scepticism that I'm sure you will have, and the cynicism, that the dynamics that are there with the leadership that's there in Cyprus, with both the issue of injustice, but also the financial realities that are around as well, and the opportunities with the natural reserves and others. All these things come to play, as well as the Americans taking a particular interest as well. That does give us an opportunity this year that we must take, because I genuinely fear, as we carry on with this, about what we're left with in the division and the just ongoing generational injustice. We must do more. So we need to do our part and support all the efforts from the leadership in Cyprus to bring about this end to this injustice.
Thank you very much, David. David Barrows, another committed and articulate friend of the island in Parliament. Jim Sheridan wants to say a few words by way of conclusion, because we would like to bring the proceedings to an end.
Question asked by our young lady friend, what we need to do. The last time I addressed this body, I made the point, exactly the point that you've made, that when the Ukraine or Crimea was invaded, politicians from all over the political parties ran to the radio waves and the television studios saying it was outrageous, quite rightly. But why is it not happening in Cyprus? In my view, for what it's worth, Cyprus is not a priority. It's fallen down the priority list every time it's happening. It builds itself up, and then something else happens in the world, it's back down again. And that's what's happening. So you're absolutely right that politicians have double standards, ignoring the Cyprus problem, but also complaining when things like Russia and Ukraine and Crimea exactly comes up. But the question that I would pose is, what would you want us to do? I mean, the question I've always asked is, the Cypriot community, the island of Cyprus, are they getting a fair return for hosting the British bases in Cyprus? I don't know if they are or not. So there has to be some pressure points that's put on the UK government and, where possible, the US government. But contrary to popular belief, politicians don't always have the answers. And if anybody in this room has any suggestions what any politicians can do in order to get Cyprus back up the priority list, we are more than happy to listen to them.
Practical, really. It's about, if we needed the gas oil and crude oil rather than olive oil, we wouldn't go the practical thing, Andreas Karolis and Susie and all the rest of them put on a Herculean paramilitary operation to get food into this building. And if you, on the way out, you go down to the main entrance and you turn right and go through the big hall at the bottom, there's steps at the end. And upstairs in there, the Jubilee room is a reception with food and drink and whatever. And please, please, please don't waste it, because it's taken bloody weeks to organise. So, you know, thanks very much for coming. It's absolutely marvellous, and please eat.